We've been talking about restructuring, which really is structuring what this thing is going to be to accomplish its mission. And we've been talking about that for January will be 3 years. In all of the conversations that I've had with many of you, that the board has had over years, to try and bring something together that we could at least talk about. And the more I thought about it over the summer, and the more I talked to people, looking at foundation people, talking to people who are active in the democracy movements, because this really is, how do we democratize? The question that's been guiding this is, we know that a centralized or hierarchical structure is not going to change systems globally in 10 years. Can't happen. So what does it look like when decision-making actions are happening on the ground where they're happening? So that nobody has to ask mommy for permission, whoever mommy is. Mommy could be the CEO, it could be a central committee, it could be the only way that this is going to really accomplish what it can accomplish is if people on the ground have the ability to do what they need to do. And so the question was, what do we need an organization for anyway? And it wasn't, what accomplishes missions, because we've talked about that. Board has talked about that a lot. What would it take? What do we need organizations for anyway? And what it came down to was two things. We need each other. We need to be able to connect to each other, and we need to be able to connect to resources. And it all became about collective enoughness. It all became about, what do we have together? What are we stronger together than we are separately? And it's not about leadership and decision making, because in at least the work that we're doing, everybody's going to be out there doing their stuff, and it's really cool. And some may be teaching something, and some may be convening something, and some may be doing a project on something. And what we need is to be able to learn from each other, to explore together, sometimes to make decisions together, sometimes we want to do a project together, but we need ways to connect with each other and connect to resources. And the typical organizational structure is not about that. The reality is that organizations, the way they're structured now, are structured based on a model that is about 300 years old, built entirely around profit and reactivity. Profit being corporate and going out and making money in the late 1700s, and reactivity being, all right, well, how do we make sure you guys don't screw up? Oh, we'll put a board on it. And that's not what we're about. So let me go through a couple things. This here is the core tenets at the core of creating the future. And you guys were all part in some way of creating the statement of our values and action that the board adopted in June. These three statements here: our power to create powerful results lies in our power to create favorable cause and effect conditions. So that's the causality. The most favorable conditions begin and end with people, and together we have everything we need. And so if that is at the core of what this is, which says that if we're going to accomplish our mission, we got to create conditions for people to be successful. And the conditions for people to be successful is focus on the people. And so one of the things I realized is most organizations, and I'll just use that as a word, it could be entity, it could be whatever the hell we wind up calling this thing, are focused on activities and programs, not people. So a food bank is focused on, we've got a nutrition program, we have got a feeding people program, we have got a food stamps program. No, we have people helping people learn about nutrition. We have people helping. And so the first thing we needed to do was change everything that we were thinking about in terms of, this isn't about programs and activities, it has to be about people. And it has to be about creating the favorable conditions for people to have what they need to do what they need. And that's the only reason to have an organization. As we've been talking about this, as the board has been talking about this, as they've come up with all kinds of models of an ecosystem with lots of sub-ecosystems, and there's been millions of different, creating the future as an ocean where anybody can swim up. There's been all kinds of analogies. There's been all kinds of examples. We know that for decision-making and leadership to be local, it needs, and distributed, it's some form of hub and spoke kind of thing. the people out there doing stuff, coming together in hubs. So what does that mean and what does that look like? This is hand-drawn and very rough, so I'll just give you warning of that. But I want to start it not at the center, I want to start it at the edges. So the most important thing is the people doing the activities. Okay, so let's say we've got activity A. Let's say people doing a blog post. There's a bunch of people doing blog posts. We need a way to connect those people who are doing blog posts to each other and to resources, whatever those resources might be that they would need. And then we have activity B. Let's say people are doing YouTube videos. And there's a whole bunch of people doing that, and they need ways to connect to each other, and they need to connect to resources. And activity C, and et cetera, and et cetera, et cetera, all of those people will have a hub for their activities, but then all those people who are coordinating those hubs of A and B and C activities, they're going to want to talk to each other. And so there needs to be a hub of people with all of these A, B, C letter activities. And I differentiated those from the ones over on the right, which are number activities. So they're different kinds of activities, but again, they're activities and they're people coming together. And there's somebody coordinating all the number activities. And what are they doing in the coordinating? It's the same thing. They're connecting people to each other for all of those reasons, whether it is learning, exploring, making decisions, etc., and connecting them to resources. And then there's shapes. Some people are doing triangle activities, and some people are doing square activities, and etc. And in every one of those cases, the hubs are places for connecting people to each other, connecting people to resources, creating the conditions for people to be able to do the stuff that they need to do. And finally, the people who are coordinating the various types of activities can come together in a major collective enoughness hub, which is in charge of making sure everybody's got what they need to do what they need to do. And that list of everything could include, and will absolutely include, making sure we're in good legal standing so that if somebody over here doing activity 1 wants to tell somebody, oh yeah, we've got a 501c3 and we can totally handle that, that we actually have a 501c3, that we're legal, that we're compliant, that we're doing everything we need to do. Part of that orange collective enoughness hub is the ability to partner and to do demonstration projects. Maybe a group of people who are expert at partnering, who understand some of the questions that need to be asked. Faculty development, because all of our activities have to do with what it takes to bring catalytic thinking out into the world in a whole bunch of different ways. Collective enoughness resource developers, so that there are people constantly looking for what kinds of resources people need, whether that's funding, whether that's stuff, whether that's etc. There's a million different things that could be happening in that orange central hub. That entire purpose is to create the favorable conditions for success for the people out there in those blue circles who are doing the work.
As I listen to you and as I look at that, what really comes to mind is the fact that you have just laid out a catalytic thinking version of AA, because that's how AA is organized. Exactly.
It is an amazing miracle, AA and Al-Anon,
Yeah.
that they are the most incredible places. And they were organized over decades.
Great.
Yeah, they were, and they made a lot of mistakes on the way, but basically the concept of a local central office, which would be your A groups or your B groups or your C groups, a local, and then there would be the national office, which is, and there are regional offices and national offices which provide the resources to the groups, plus all the groups out there that are just having a meeting, and that's really basically all the people who are out there practicing catalytic thinking.
Exactly. There's two more things that I want to share with you guys that have been constant drumbeats through the conversations that the board has been having that were fun to allow to percolate. The first is that if the hubs are places that are guided by our values that are put into action by catalytic thinking. If in the hubs, when people come together, they're practicing catalytic listening, they're practicing catalytic decision making, they're always asking the same questions in the same order, the way that we do, they're practicing collective enoughness, then so many of the, how do you make sure people don't screw up things that happen in traditional organizations, we know that people will be doing things in a way that practice catalytic thinking and spread it, because that's the way it is. I mean, that's what systems are. Systems is, that's the way we do things. And if the system in each of these individual hubs is, well, these are the questions that we ask, and this is the order in which we ask them. The first thing we do is we listen. And we listen for what's strong, and we listen for what's possible, and we listen for values. And then we reach for what's possible, and then we create conditions. And when we take actions, we do it through collective enough. If that happens every single time, then we don't have to worry about, quote, leadership, because everybody's going to be leading the stuff they're doing. I think so often in community benefit work, and I think of community benefit work as social enterprise, as government offices, we make the assumption that people have to be led and guided and told what to do and managed. And if we make the assumption that if catalytic thinking is guiding all of these activities, then people will be their best. So that's number one in terms of some of the question that people have. Well, who's going to make decisions? Well, we'll make them together, and here's how they'll be made. And they'll be made as locally as humanly possible, on the ground by people who are actually doing the work. The other thing that became really clear, all of the hubs of activity, if this really is adhering to our values, which is meeting people where they are, all of these hubs of activity would be at places along the continuum of potential. And so the letter activities or the number activities or the shape activities would actually be, replace the word in that left-hand yellow dot as if only activities. So there'll be blog posts as the if only activities. So for people who are at the if only stage, there will be short YouTubes. There may be bringing people together around very, very narrow topics, or a webinar around a very, very narrow topic. And that will be people who deeply understand people who are at the if only stage. Over in the numbers, if we substitute that for I'm practicing this, which would be you guys. I'm being this, which would be you guys. Whole completely different range of kinds of activities. And the people who gravitate towards providing those activities may be the same as the if onlys and maybe completely different. And their needs in providing those activities are going to be completely different. And yet the decisions will be based in catalytic thinking, and they'll be coming up with absolutely kick-ass stuff that they develop themselves, coordinated around the people who happen to be in the practitioner stage, and et cetera. And so if all of these hubs are rooted in the continuum, and our work is constantly rooted in the continuum, then what we're doing is we're bringing people together around the activities that they're doing, rooted in the continuum, rooted in catalytic thinking. We're bringing everybody in, everybody who's coordinating one of those activities. So let's say we've got 10 activities in if only. All 10 of those people will come together in a hub where they can talk about all the different things that they're doing, coordinate, explore together, et cetera. And whatever is needed comes out of that central hub. And so that's sort of kind of what I've been thinking about, that if it's rooted in connecting us to each other and making sure we have everything we need individually out in the world to do what we're doing, then it doesn't need a leader like at all.